Overclockers. I'm 8Pack and I'm here to discuss with you the new 7900 XTX graphics card by AMD Radeon. What we're going to be covering in the video today is the specs of the card, information about the cooling, information about the stock performance, and of course, we're overclockers, we'll be doing some overclocking too. So if you want to find out about all these items, watch to the very end of the video. And I'll be giving you a summary of whether this card is a massive disappointment or a mega device. So that all being said, let's get into it. Okay, firstly let's look at the specs of the card. What we have on this card here is 96 compute units, 96 Ray accelerators. We have 24 gigabytes of GDDR6 with a maximum memory bandwidth of 960 gigabytes per second. Obviously, just by reading the specs, what we see is here that the spec of this card is very, very strong and at least 1.7 to 1.75 times the spec of the last flagship product, should I say. The quoted spec for the boost speed of this card is 2500 megahertz, but in testing, even at stock speeds, I saw boosts of up to 2900 megahertz. So quite a significant improvement on the quoted boost clock is what I got when I was testing and benchmarking the card without any overclock. Another interesting thing that AMD have added to this card is DisplayPort 2.1 technology. This technology has support for up to 8K monitors at 60 Hz refresh rate. And that's something we haven't seen on a commercial GPU before, and it's interesting to see it here on this particular card. Okay, so we've just discussed a little bit about the specs of the card, which are indeed impressive. Now let's look at the physical design of the card. So the card, as you can see here, is what I would call a standard sized PCB card. And it's actually a very meaty cooler with a nice matte black backplate and a nice matte black cooler. The cooler size, if we look at it this way on, is approximately 2.5 slots, maybe not even quite 2.5 slots in size. So this cooler and card will fit in 99% of PC cases available on the market today. Certainly gaming design cases, this card is going to fit in either mounted horizontally or vertically. It will give no one any problems. What we have in terms of connectivity with your PSU is this card, you don't need any kind of adapters. You only need available 2 8-pins off your PSU here, and the recommended PSU for the card is a minimum of 800 watts. I personally tested with my usual 1000 and 1200 watt PSUs and had no problem whatsoever, as you'd expect from that kind of wattage. But AMD are saying that you're fine with 800 watts, which I would say you will be, because the power draw of this card is only around 350 watts, and I can confirm that with testing. In fact, it's often less than 350 watts to get full performance. So now let's discuss a little bit about testing. The hardware I used to test was what's become my standard graphics card testing rig, which is an AMD 7950X tuned with PBO boosting, which can boost all the way up to 6 gigahertz. In general, it's running about 5850 during these benchmarks. I've got 32 gig of 6000 megahertz Corsair Expo memory that run at the Expo speed and timings, and I've got an Asus flagship crosshair motherboard in there. I'm using a Windows 11 install with the driver provided to me by AMD to do the testing, which I believe is the launch driver. Maybe there'll be some tweaks before then, but I believe the performance will be similar on the launch driver. Okay, so obviously while I was performing my standard set of benchmarks, which are Superposition at 4K, we've got Heaven Valley at 1080p, we've got Firestrike at 1080p, we've got Port Royal at numerous resolutions, we've got Time Spy at numerous resolutions, and we've also got Final Fantasy Bench at 4K. I was obviously paying attention to the temperatures and cooling as well, so I can report a little bit about those. And I was even doing longer testing of around 6 hours of Port Royal, absolutely maxed out to check stability as well as cooling, because obviously with heavy ray tracing in that, it's pushing the card very, very hard, and we can check how effective the cooler is as well as how stable my overclocking was. Overclocking we'll come on to a little bit later. I'm going to cover the stock testing first. So let's now discuss how good was the cooler. Well, obviously we can see from what I've just done with the physical, it's design of cooler which is just over 2 slots wide and is therefore very compatible with a lot of different builds. It's a 3-fan design, as you can see here. Now, Because it is a 3-fan design and quite a small cooler, this is what we call an AIB card, that is it's a reference design from AMD, and it is designed to be compatible and to go into everything. What I noticed was that when the card was under very heavy load, that the fans were spinning very quickly, and therefore the card was fairly loud. Now, the trade-off, obviously, of the card being fairly loud is that it's a compact card and will fit in everything. So it's important that we understand the balance that AMD is trying to get here. Yes, the card can be quite loud, but it also is going to fit in pretty much everything. So what I noticed of it whilst I was benching this and doing extended Port Royal runs for stability is that the GPU core got as high as 69 degrees C, which is very good and very much within tolerances. The GPU hotspot, however, did get up to 112 degrees C. Now, at 112 degrees C, a lot of people would say this is too hot, but obviously the card wasn't throttling, and I never saw a drop-off in performance at 112 degrees C. And on previous generations AMD on a stock cooler, or not just a stock, but even some aftermarket coolers, we've seen similar high hotspot figures and seen no increases in RMA or drop off in performance. So I'd suggest that's still within tolerances, although not ideal. And when we see some more AIB design coolers coming out, which will probably be larger, with also higher powered fans, that then can, because of the size of the card, can run less quickly, we will probably still see, we'll see this value come down from 112 to probably the late 90s. But I myself have no concerns with anything to do with this cooling. The only thing I can say is if you're expecting a silent card, this is not a silent card. So let's now talk a little bit about stock testing. I've already just gone through the kind of benchmarks that I run, and you'll see those on the graphs coming on the screen now. Right, so what are my overall impressions of the stock testing? Well, it was very, very solid performance, to be honest. It was beating the main competitor at a similar price point in almost every single bench that I ran. The only caveat there was when heavy ray tracing was used at lower resolutions, such as 1440p Port Royal. The competition was I would say significantly ahead there, but that was caught up by the 7900 XTX when you went to higher resolutions, where the ray tracing ability of the card did actually show us has been really quite good actually, but only at high resolution. And I suspect that that's to do with the memory bandwidth of the card taking effect at these higher resolutions. But overall, yeah, I was very, very impressed with the performance of this card, and it was beating the competition's similarly priced card in pretty much everything of the older benches, you know, running DX11 and DX12, where no ray tracing was taking place. I didn't manage to bench this card on any professional applications, sadly. My usual Blender test that I'm running for professional applications is CUDA based, and obviously AMD technology is not CUDA. And given the short duration that I've had the card before I can produce the video, I didn't have time to go back and test a lot of other cards as well as this one on a different professional benchmark. I mean, I am aware now that AMD is doing pretty well in PyTorch applications and such that, which would be something that I'd like to check out at a later stage. Okay, so we've gone through some fairly impressive stock results. How was the overclocking, which is the bit I'm most interested in? So firstly, I thought once I decided to test overclocking, I would check out the presets within the AMD driver, such as Rage Mode. So within the AMD driver, you can just click on these under tuning, and they give you a supposed boost in performance. Anyway, so I first tried Rage Mode, and I didn't particularly see any boost at all in performance from that particular option. The option was stable, but in fact, as I say, it did nothing to my benchmarking scores at all. Then there's another couple of options in there, one that gives you an option to max out only the GPU. So I clicked on that, and it gave me quite a high frequency of over 3100 megahertz as the maximum boost. But during testing of that, I found out that either the driver became unstable and reset, or the scores again were worse, similar to Rage. The final option I tried in that particular section to gain performance was the just memory overclocking, and I had the same problems with that particular option on all my benchmarking as I did with the other two options that I've discussed prior. So for me, those three options were not very well implemented currently in the AMD drivers, but I'm sure it's something they can work on. Also in that section, thinking about trying to bring down this, if you like, the hotspot temperature from 112, I thought maybe I would try undervolting, because on previous generations of AMD card, you've been able to undervolt a little bit, and you've been able to gain boost performance by keeping the temperatures low. So I thought I would try out the automatic undervolting preset within the driver. Now I can also report that sadly this did not work either, and I had a lot of problems with stability in that, and it just kept resetting the driver when I ran anything. Now obviously all these problems don't mean that this is never going to work, and I'm sure AMD will fix all this stuff, but I had really a mixed bag of results with the auto overclocking functions. What I did, however, have great results with was MSI Afterburner. Just downloaded the latest version, left the driver on completely auto settings, and then used the sliders on Afterburner to firstly max out the power target. Then I managed to improve the core overclocking to a maximum boost of about 3200 megahertz, which was crazy high. I mean, in most benchmarks, it wasn't actually, reaching 3200 megahertz for most of the time while running the benchmark. The benchmark itself was usually running around 3000 megahertz. Sometimes it reached up to 3200, but not a lot of the time. On lower resolutions where there's lighter load, 3200 megahertz was possible. But like I said, the average, or should I say the lower end, was around 3000 megahertz, but that's still obviously a great overclock compared to what AMD are quoting as, the boost maximum of 2500 megahertz, whole 700 megahertz better, which I thought was crazy good on MSI Afterburner. And then also I could add between plus 500 to plus 700 on the memory, with varying results. Now plus 500 actually gave me the same, if you like, scores in the benchmarks as plus 700. There were no difference in stability or anything between those two figures. So I tend to just run at plus 500, because with that you could overclock the core a little bit more and get more overall score than running the memory higher and losing a bit on the core. So that's how I decided to optimize the card. Now, from this overclocking, which for everyone, as everyone knows who we're into overclocking, this is actually free performance. We got some really solid boosts in performance figures without sacrificing any temperatures at all. The temperatures were the same after my 6 hours of Port Royal run, and the stability was of course the same. So you could run your games at these kind of frequencies. And I did actually test a couple of cards as well, both of them Sapphire 7900 XTX, to make sure that they could both overclock in the same ballpark figure, and indeed they could. So I suspect anyone buying the card will be able to get to similar frequencies when using MSI Afterburner to overclock the card. Right, so now we've discussed how I overclocked and the successes, and indeed the things that AMD need to work on the card. Let's see what the results of those overclockers were. So that should be coming on the screen now. So as you can see from the graphs on the screen, overclocking on Superposition at 1080p medium settings gave us a 2.6 increase over stock. I mean, that particular bench is also CPU limited because of the low resolution. We've discussed this before, 1080p with these cards is really child's play. Unigen Valley at 1080p, that saw a less than 1% increase over stock, again, because it's CPU limited. Times by extreme graphics score, that went up 3.5%, so a full 3.5% increase on your FPS, which is already high, so that's really solid. Times by graphics score was a 3.14% increase, again pretty solid for no extra cost. And Final Fantasy, which is a genuine gaming benchmark at 4K resolution with maxed out high quality, we saw a really solid 6.1% increase over stock. So all that free performance is on the table with a bit of MSI Afterburner and a bit of tuning for any end user. So what does 8pack think of this card? In conclusion, this card is an absolute monster, especially at the recommended retail price. It's beating the competition in almost everything apart from ray tracing or very heavy ray tracing benchmarks. And in those it's keeping up pretty well. Also, obviously with this card, you're using 125 watts less power, or at least 100 anyway, and at the same time, you're able to fit the card in pretty much every PC case that's been out previously, and you're able to use old technology as well as new technology PSUs, and you only need the standard 2 8-pin connectors. Will this card be in 8-pack PCs? Yes, it will, as a standard card in the framerate PC, and then as a drop-down option in all the other 8-pack PCs that we have on our website. Obviously, to incorporate these in 8-pack PCs, I am waiting for a water block. So come on, water block vendors, get the blocks out. And I perceive that on water, that they'll be able to drop the hotspot temperatures of these cards below 90C, which will allay any concerns anyone might have there. So obviously, if you want to pick up this great card, you can do right now on our website. Click on the link below for that. And finally, as always, don't like the video. Please do not subscribe to this channel. And do check out my dancing pics. And if you like, comment on how cool I am.